Welcome to part 102 of a Simplex converted to a Great Western Railway Prairie tank. This one is the water test. Filling the water tanks to make sure they don't leak, opening the injector water valve and operating the hand pump. But there is a big problem. I didn't think that the water tanks were going to leak because I'd already tested this. In a previous episode I was in the garden removing the paint with paint stripper. I filled the tanks with water and none of them leaked. I'm really performing this water test to make sure of three things. In this clip I'm filling the bunker tank so I can test the injector's water valve. I filled the bunker tank right to the top just to make sure there were no leaks that may have developed since I last tested it. This is the water valve in closed position, now it's in open position, and this is what happens. The water runs out of the injector's overflow. That seems okay. I won't empty the tank because very shortly there will be the first gas-fired steam test. Not in this video though. I'm filling the tank once again right up to the top just to make sure there aren't any leaks at all. As I fill the right-hand tank, the balancing pipe makes it so that the left-hand tank fills up as well. I left the engine for about half an hour and then returned to have a look at it, and as you can see by this clip, there are no leaks whatsoever, apart from a slight drip occasionally from the injector's overflow pipe, and that's nothing to worry about. In this episode I'm going to be running the engine quite a lot to fill the boiler using the axle-driven pump, and for that reason I'm lubricating every one of the moving parts. This is standard lubricating oil that I buy from a company called Hallett Oils. Their website address is on screen at the moment, and it's really good stuff as far as steam engines are concerned. I had to allow some time to elapse before the balancing pipe actually balanced the levels in the tanks. Here I'm adding some more water until it's visible in the top of the tank. This is so I'll be able to see the water level dropping once I use the pumps. When I run the engine with the water bypass valve closed, most of the water is running onto the bench. That's useful. I was quite surprised by this because I fixed the ram on the pump and it has an O-ring, so that can't be leaking. I wonder where all this water's suddenly coming from. And it's not just a small amount of water, it's a virtual torrent. A miniature flash flood on my workbench. I have quite a lot of these cotton cloths. It's actually curtain lining and it makes really good cloths for general purpose use. And by positioning one of the cotton cloths as shown, it persuades the water to run off the bench into a receptacle that I've put underneath the bench to catch the water. I can't say I'm very happy about this situation because I do know what the problem is and it's my fault. The question is, should I go and lie down in a dark room for 12 hours or should I fix it? I know, I'll try the hand pump. The water leak is coming from both of the unions on the output of the pump. Mainly because I forgot to tighten them, and that is a really stupid but very common thing to do. Here's a clip from part 40 of the series which shows where the problem is. This really weird plumbing arrangement is unnecessary, but I left it in place because I thought, well, it's part of the original engine's build. The problem was, when I refitted it, I forgot to tighten the union nuts that you can see in the foreground. If all I was doing was rebuilding this Simplex, I would have probably remembered, but as I make the videos, I change the subject frequently with the intention of keeping things interesting. Now these two union nuts are quite inaccessible, well, very inaccessible. So I thought, well, I'll make a special spanner with an extension on it. This didn't work. Even though the water was leaking very badly, the level still went up in the water gauge. This is via the hand pump. But as the hand pump connects to a T-piece which is connected to the fancy plumbing underneath the engine, it was still leaking even when I was using the hand pump, so it took ages to do this. The axle pump is actually pumping some water into the boiler against the boiler pressure, which is currently at about 40 pounds per square inch. But alas, most of the water is on the bench and dripping off into the container on the floor. The unions on the axle-driven pump don't leak quite so badly if I open the bypass valve, but that is not a viable solution to the problem because it's utterly pointless just circulating the water from one tank to the other. After I tried using a long piece of steel bar and a small hammer to attempt to tighten the union nuts that way, I decided the only thing to do was to clear the bench, tip the engine on its side and have a closer look. And here I am gently tapping this piece of steel rod in an unsuccessful attempt to try and tighten the unions to prevent the leak. Thinking about the feasibility of using a pair of long-nosed pliers was just desperation. By attempting to tighten the union nuts onto the outlet using a long rod, there was a very slight improvement, but it's still not right. I gave the compressor a bit of a chance to build up the pressure, then I opened the regulator wide. And now there's hardly any water leaking from the tanks, and there's a simple reason for that: the tanks are empty. Going off at a tangent, whilst my hand was on the regulator, I could feel air blowing onto it. And this air was coming from the banjo union, which is the way the pressure gauge is connected into the steam turret. When I bought this pressure gauge siphon, it came complete with 2 aluminium washers, which have failed, so I'm going to replace the washers with copper ones. Time to look in my box of 1/4 unions and washers. Here it is, and this is a top tip. It's quite difficult to pick washers out of a box like this that are sat on the bottom, but if you spit on your finger and press your finger onto the washer you've selected, the washer sticks to the saliva on your finger and makes it very easy to get the washer out of the box. Very important, do not lick your finger, spit on it, because if you lick your finger, this could affect your health relative to what you've been handling. I'm applying some Loctite 542 to the thread, and it's great for this, but it doesn't taste very good. Once I refitted the siphon, the pressure gauge worked okay, so that hadn't been blocked up by the sealant, and there are no leaks whatsoever. Here I'm using the unorthodox method of testing for an air leak by using my finger. Shortly after the quick diversion of sealing the leak on the pressure gauge, I'm pleased to say that I've stopped crying, but now my head hurts from banging it on the bench. This is a workshop floor below the bench. I think I need to get the mop from the house. There's only one thing for it: the superstructure has to be lifted up. So I've removed all of the parts that are required to be removed to allow this to happen. I cut some pieces of card to place under the front of the tanks, and using a substantial piece of polyurethane foam, I propped up the superstructure as shown here. I firmly tightened both of the union nuts on the water outlet from the pump using a 7/16 AF spanner. The last part of the job is to lower the superstructure to its original position and refix all of the piping that I had to remove to allow the lifting of the superstructure. Once again, using my orange funnel, I filled the side tanks to the top. Using a few cotton cloths, I made sure the top of the bench was perfectly dry. Then I ran the engine on compressed air, closed the bypass valve and waited for the water to appear, but it didn't, apart from that tiny spot of water which was left over from the previous major leaking. After an initial run with the axle pump working perfectly, I tried the hand pump and that worked fine too. And now when I do the coal-fired steam test, I can be happy in the knowledge that if the live steam injector fails, I still have the axle-driven pump and the hand pump to keep the water level in the right place. I can't say that this has been my all-time favourite video, but at least everything works now. Please stay healthy, thanks for watching, and I hope you found it useful. Please take the time to visit my Mainsteam Models website and click on the section of the website that says Video Playlists. And by doing that, you can find other videos that you may like to watch. And by using the playlists, you can actually watch the videos back to back.